and we just go right straight to the point. Today, we are happy to have with us Professor Valentina Fusari. But I'll just give a little brief of her background. First, welcome. Valentina's academic background were the University of Siena, University of Pisa, and University of Oxford. And after schooling, her foundational experience were rooted in Ethiopia, the work experience. After which she returned to Italy as an adjunct professor at the University of Padua. And since 2022, a couple of years back, Professor Fusari teaches history of Africa at the University of Turin. So much about that. But her research is broadly rooted in demographic anthropology, social history, and colonial demographics, with interdisciplinary perspectives, and specifically about hidden populations, mixedness in the Horn of Africa, where she carried out her fieldwork on Ethiopia and Eritrea. He's here with us. It's her second visit to the AAC. She came first as a visiting fellow a few years ago to conclude an investigation into the recently recorded drop in fertility rates in Eritrea, 1991 to 2020. And that is where we had a convergence, because then I was also looking at that drop in fertility. Also in Ghana, all of a sudden, these were populations in Africa that are showing real sudden drop in numbers of children per woman. So why is this happening? How is this happening? In what way is this related to education? Education was what brought us together, because suddenly, highly educated women appear to be even having more children than less educated women. So the particular attention she's paid to this are to changes attributable to proxy determinants, including reproductive health, female education, as well as mobility and the socio-political environment. And she used this visiting opportunity to show how demographic behaviors that move away from tradition alter population structures and dynamics. So we are particularly honored to welcome you once again, because on this occasion, as our guest speaker, you will be talking on the waves of memory in the Red Sea, unpacking mixedness through Italo-Eritrean livescapes. Without further ado, 45 minutes to tell us in brief what you've been spending here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me here again. I think this is the third phase of my life here. The first one as a visiting. The second one as a coordinator of this project, and the research I presented today is part of this broad project. And also I'm very happy because there are some of my former students in Eritrea. So it is a great conjunction that give me the opportunity and above all the pleasure to engage once more with the African Studies Center community. So as Inca has already spoiled, today I move to another topic. It is another research line I started investigating when I was working on fertility, and especially on this mixed fertility. So the result of the colonial encounter in Eritrean and the so-called Italo-Eritreans, or with a derogatory term, the Metici, or with a lot of other derogatory terms that are in the air when we speak about this kind of groups. And as I told you, this is part of a broader project founded by the European Union under the line of the ERC Consolidator Grant. I'm the PI of Red Mix, that is Unpacking Mixedness for an inclusive history of the Red Sea in the last 2 centuries. So today we will dig together into the space, why the Red Sea, into mixedness, why mixedness and how we can manage, and with case studies. One of the Italo-Eritrean is the case studies I'm carrying out in this in this project, especially concerning their social and labor spheres, because they are the spaces in their everyday life that somehow shape their trajectories and somehow put them in contact with all the other groups within, not only the colonial, but also the, say, post-colonial, or I don't like to say post-colonial concerning this case, but concerning the independence and the decades just beyond the colonial times. So let's try to set the scene. When the container ship Ever Given stuck in the Suez Canal in March 2021, the world's attention was focused on this choke point as a critical passageway between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, highlighting its importance to the international trade and commerce. Once again, during the tension along the maritime route through the southern choke point of the Red Sea, so this Bab el-Mandeb, during the so-called Red Sea crisis that escalated in late 2023 and early 2024, following the events in the Gaza Strip and the attacks by Ansar Allah's two merchant ships in the Red Sea. The major shipping companies decide to reroute their vessels and go back through the circumnavigation of Africa. Once again, the attention was driven to think about the high cost and time of transportation. And so once again, also in these cases, the discussion concerning these region focused on the global trade. Such an attitude, so the idea of considering this space, this liquid space, only focusing on the choke points or only focusing on the global trade, reinforced the idea that the Red Sea is, and especially in past was, primarily a sea of transit, despite its complex social dynamics that remained in the background of all these discussion, description, and narratives. Its geopolitical relevance was again highlighted in early 2024, when Somaliland signed a memorandum of understanding with Ethiopia. Through this agreement, Somaliland granted Ethiopia access to its Red Sea coastline for naval purposes in exchange of official recognition as an independent state. However, for sure, the Red Sea served and serves as a crucial crossroads, both in terms of intercontinental crossroads between Africa and Asia, but also Europe, but also as an intramaritime space between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean seas. So at the end of the day, we can say that this body of water connects 3 continents and 2 other liquid spaces. And they connected in a wider area that is usually called the Afro-Eurasian area. The problem comes when we try to approach scholarly this area, because African and Middle Eastern studies, with their focus on translocal and global mobilities, have already highlighted the connected histories of the 2 shores of the 2 seas and the area that somehow gravitated around the region. And they have unfolded this connected history over time concerning the Red Sea, but also beyond the Red Sea and across the Red Sea. However, as Jonathan Miran, in my opinion, clearly points out, the region has long been misrepresented as a historical space, or when acknowledged as a historical subject, it has been merely reduced to a transitional space. It doesn't matter if it was approached through a macro lens or within the framework of the African studies or the Middle Eastern studies. So there was this problem that we are able to recognize that there was connection, but this connection changes a long time and are difficult to trace if we approach it only on the African studies side. So it means we read this story on the African shore or from the African shore, or if you read this story on the Arabian shores or from the Arabian shores. So just a glimpse to the periodization, trying to understand what happened over time. Like all the other navigable bodies of water that we have just mentioned, also the Red Sea has historically facilitated the movement of people, goods, and ideas. And this gave rise to different forms of cosmopolitanism. They are quite cosmopolitan, the ports of the Red Sea, although they are mainly studied as ports of the Indian Ocean. We don't know why, but they enter this space. And these spaces, these ports, these areas and cities, especially on the coastline, were characterized by multiculturalism that were able to transcend ethnic, religious, political, and regional divides. So, over time, the Red Sea also emerged as a sea of empire. We have the Ottoman Empire, we have other reign, we have the Ethiopian Empire, we have the European imperialism, and so on and so forth. And all these kind of empire somehow host and foster a complex history of mobility in the region. In the 19th century, the mobility of the region, so the ability to connect the different space that somehow gravitate along across this region, was altered. And they were altered especially for three main issues. The first one is the introduction of the steam navigation in the 1830s. It means we are no more linked to the monsoon winds in order to navigate that space. Then we have the opening of the Suez Canal. It means it squeezed the trajectories that for example, the British used to reach their main colony in Asia. And also there is this interest, this commitment, let's say, by the European colonial governments to abolish the slave trade. So to abolish a specific trajectory and movement of people from one space to another. Such changes resulted in and added complexities to the story of mixedness in the region, because mobility can also took time. So we have people that have to settle for a while in order to move, and they can create union, intermarriages, relation in all these places. And also they added complexities because these new mobilities and this new environment create new waves of migrants and settlers that arrive in the Red Sea. Think about especially the Europeans, but also the Asians that arrived there. And these different mobility, layers of mobility that resulted in different kind of mixing and mixedness could be seen as an opportunity, but also as a risk over time. For example, during the Ottoman Empire, the intermarriage was used to access land, to access local resources. And so it was somehow facilitated, it was a strategy, it was a practices that was there. But during colonial time, for example, mixed ancestry people was seen as a threat to polarized or wannabe polarized societies. And also they create an hierarchy of mixedness. Not all the mixed group were the same in the eyes of the colonizers, and not all of them, they were the same in the eyes of the hosting context, so in all the territories there. And even later, where we have when the new state can reach the independence, or they were struggling for their independence, these mixed individuals, so people with mixed backgrounds, were somehow called into questions because of their loyalty towards the new national cause, we can say. And they were called into question because of their heritage. I mean, in terms of bio-legal heritage or in terms of what kind of socialization they have. So to who they belong right now that things are changing over time. So what I'm trying to do in my research and together with the team that work with me is trying to understand what happens when we move from waves of migration, so from mobility and from trajectories that are so gendered to mixedness, so to other groups within the region that are playmakers, that are once again stealing the words from or borrowing the words from Jonathan Miran, Red Sea citizens. So they are not something that move away. They are people that develop their own life in the region, that they contribute to the connection in the region, that contribute to the changes in the region. So we have for sure, due to the phases we have just seen, transitory migrants, organizational migrants. In this case, we can remind Leo Lucas and Annette Smith with this category. We have workers. We think about Lucia Carminati for the workers of Port Said, the Suez Canal, but a lot of other experience in the region. And we have settlers, different wave of settlers that decide to live their lives in the region. And they resulted in mixed ancestry people that can be somehow grouped in macro groups, like I just quoted there, the Afro-Arabians or the Euro-Africans. But within this group, we have other subgroups, and all of them, they are not homogeneous. They are not homogeneous because each person may have different status. They may have a status de facto, so they are the result of a background that somehow has crossed a line. But they also have a social status that depends on how they are able to be integrated, included in the society. And they have a status, civitatis, that may change over time and that can be determined by both legal rules and status of one of the sites they descend, but also they can be based on the new changes, socio-political changes within the content, and especially within the new countries. And this mobility and this mixedness has already been traced, and not only thanks to the historians, but also thanks to the archaeologists that were able to read and collect the DNA of the population of the two shores of the Red Sea. And especially we can see that since the 16th century, we have this gendered movement. So usually we have African women that used to move towards the Arabian Peninsula and have mixed children there with Arabian, let's say, men. On the other side, on the other shore, the situation is a little bit different because this part of the Red Sea attracted males and men from different parts. So if we reason in terms of genetics, we have a mix in terms of Y options and African women, but we also have movement of these women. So what we call, for example, we will see in a while, Italo-Eritreans, most of the time they can be also the descendant of Italian and Ethiopian men and Ethiopian women. All this to say that although the mobility across the Red Sea is becoming a defining feature of the global history of this region, with traders, slaves, pilgrims, soldiers, workers, settlers, and refugees, and its protagonists, the spatial and social mobility of mixed ancestry people, that is the result, once again, of these encounters, sexual, intimate, long-lasting, or so different type of encounter, have remained on the sidelines of the thematic and methodological debate about the region. That's why I decided to focus my project on this topic. So, despite being a hallmark of the region and acting as playmakers and language and cultural brokers, mixed ancestry people have been, until now, imperfectly understood in this region. In fact, they have just been regarded as a side product of the mobility, and their agency has been rarely underlined. And it has been rarely underlined or specifically underlined just concerning or citizenships or their vulnerability, or when we have changes, socio-political changes that somehow need a rephrase, a realignment of these statuses. So, not true that we do not have case studies or colleagues that already have explored groups, but it has not been done in a systemic way and trying to connect the different life, professional, social trajectories of this group over time and across generation. In order to do that, we have to overcome some limitation. As I have spoiled, until now, the region had been, not until now, but until, let's say, the early 2000 and in the last 15, 20 years, we have strong contribution concerning the Red Sea studies. But in order to arrive to the Red Sea study, it means we have overcome the division. We have overcome the approach that we were used to consider when we would like to study the region. So what we are trying to do is to overcome the division between African studies and Middle East studies and consider as a valuable opportunity the Red Sea studies. So that is a field that underlines the connection, especially the translocal connection, and the Red Sea as a space in its own to be considered as a demographic, as an historical subject of studies. Plus, what we have seen is that it's not true that mixed race or mixed ancestry people have not been studied all around the world. But it's true that despite mixedness is a feature of this region, there are not so many studies concerning the region. So we try to overcome the gap between scholarly fields and investigate the key role of mixedness, the key role of mixed ancestry people in order to provide a sociocultural history of mixedness in the region, and at the same time trying to re-examine, to reread the history of the region from the perspective of this group. And in order to do that, we have to triangulate different fields of studies and different approach, like I have already mentioned the Red Sea studies and the critical mixed race studies that are doing pushing a great debate concerning the conceptual work, concerning the terminology, concerning the contextualization, concerning the continuities and discontinuities about the use of terms that are grounded and contextualized, and then they move sometimes with the people, and also they shift their references. For example, in the case of the Mualladin, most of the that are Afro-Arabians, the most of the time, as Marina Direct and Samson Bezabe has already underlined, the same term is used also for people that are, let's say, fully Yemeni, but born abroad and then went back to Yemen. So there is this different, also terms are nuanced, but at the same time they should be precise. and also the loading term mixed race to be accepted or not. Can it be considered derogatory or not? Shall we speak about race or not? But anyway, this is the name of the field. And we are aware that also the use of race, it is can change the impression if we move from contexts that have been somehow loaded with racist laws and other where just considered as a technical general term. And in order to dig into the life trajectories of these people, we opted for a global microhistory, like Ginsburg, but to be even more precise in the approach of Levy, that consider microhistory. That's something that is not maybe the lives of these people are not exceptional, or if they are exceptional, they allowed us also to learn something more on that lives that are not exceptional because of the contrast. And this idea comes also because these people are really mobile in the region and beyond. So they create and they promote global networks. And this is how we try to approach. Okay, that's fine. It means we should handle some data, some information about the life of these people. And also in this case, we are in the position to triangulate, because otherwise we can't really grasp the decision of the people or the community, and we can't even understand that there are different stories. For example, in terms of citizenships, the stories that we are able to reconstruct to the archive are not the one, or they are not aligned with the information we can grasp to the oral history, just because, for example, we have in the archive an Italo-Eritrean got access to the Italian citizenship, but at the same time, we don't know how. Maybe he paid someone in order to be recognized as Italian, and this comes from the oral history. And it means also they change their name, by they change in the documents, and in their everyday life, they are recognized and named in another way. So we can somehow navigate these or reconnect these different sources through citizen science and co-design. I think this is really important, co-design with these people, these families, this community, because the priorities of the researcher, the most of the time, are not the priorities of the families that allow us to enter their private archives. And these archives are not organized, cataloged as official in the colonial archive. So in order to understand why that material has been stored, has been organized or not organized at all, we need to work with people. And people at the same time, and to citizen science, know how to help the researcher. So they got the opportunity to volunteer in research, and to volunteer trying to understand how the researcher is going to organize. And it is through citizen science and co-design that we are really able first to assess original material, to apply a bottom-up perspective, to escape the colonial or the nationalist categories, and to provide a fresh history about the groups and the region. Of course, our study can't be statistically representative. We are not able to understand how exactly many people we have. In some cases we have because we have the census. In other cases it's tricky because the census, for example, if you take the example of the colonial census in Eritrea, what we have, it is an aggregate number. We don't know how old are they, we don't know if they are male, if they are female, and first of all, if they change their citizenship, or if they were recognized, legalized by their fathers, they were full Italian. And if they were not, they were African subject, colonial subject. So the archive is not so useful to trace the everyday life of these people. And to trace the everyday life, we have selected some case studies. From here, okay. Some case studies. I'm focused on the Italo-Eritreans. The other are, some of them are free if you would like to join the project. There is another team member that is following the Iranians in the region. Another one that is following the Yemeni Djiboutian and the Jewish of Aden, so Yemeni Jewish of Aden. And this is interesting because the Yemeni Jewish of Aden, they have some networking and let's say marriage market that is totally different compared to the one of the Yemeni Djiboutian. And selecting this case study allow us to do different comparison. We can compare different groups in a specific historical phase. We can compare different generations within the same group. So we are not looking at something exceptional. We are looking at some groups that are able to contribute to the history of the Red Sea. But at the same time, you can also compare the gender perspective, the gender destinies, fates of these people. So on the one side, and this comes clearly from the population studies, on the one side, we are able to compare in one space and in time. On the other one, we are able to follow the life trajectory of people a long time. Let's come now to some Italo-Eritreans. Probably someone here can recognize these people, and I've selected not gender, not generation, but the social environment and the labor environment, as spoiled at the beginning, because these are the real arena where these protagonists have the opportunity to be in contact with all of them. And in this social arena, an important role has been played by sports. Sport was a way to be and also to prevail to other groups within the population. Of course, it's important to say that, for example, the first picture, until 1951, so well beyond the colonial time, it was not possible in Eritrea to have mixed football teams. And this football team is a football team of an institute, of the Istituto San Giuseppe, also called Meticciato. So it was the place, the institute where that hosts these people starting from the early 30s. And they use, so all the team was made by mixed guys. Another interesting life history in terms of sport is Luciano and Italo Vassallo. They were two brothers. They grew up with their mother. They have not been recognized by the father, so they was also in this case, these people, this one is GS. He was Eritrean and he is now Italian. And in this case, Luciano Vassallo he was the leader of the Ethiopian team after the annexation. And this is in 1962 when they won the African Cup. This is really interesting because again in 2016 on the Gazzetta dello Sport, this is kind of Bible for Italian especially football supporter. In 2016, there was an article tracing his football history and say the title was something, when an Italian won the African Cup. I mean, if he was an Italian, it was quite difficult that, so it was under the Derg regime that we moved out of the country and got the chance to become Italian. In this case, it is Carmelo Salimbeni. Carmelo has a surname. It was called Caramello. Caramel is caramel, so it's clear remind to the color of his skin, something in between. And he was, even in this case, he was part of the Ethiopian team that raced during the Olympic Games in Tokyo, if I'm not mistaken. And this is another Italo-Eritrean. It was quite famous. This is Giovanni Mazzola, and he remained Eritrean. Then he became a tailor, and he was a close friend. A close friend of Abebe Bikila. So there is a famous picture of Abebe Bikila when he was in Rome, and he is on the shoulder of Giovanni Mazzola, who was a mixed guy at the time. What we see there is this, we have mixed that are Eritrean, are Ethiopians, are Italian, so their status civitatis change over time. And another important space were the car racing. The car racing because it was dominated at the beginning by the Italians. And so young mixed guys that try to somehow compete and challenge the white predominance. It is something that increased their masculinity and a way to be accepted there. But we are still in a space that was segregated. And we are speaking here in the 50s and 60s. So what happens is that there are some spaces like the Mocambo, it is still there, it changed a little bit, but it was a place where the Italian or the white youth used to attend. It is different when we came to Cinema Dante. It was an opera house, but it was not so fashionable and became the cinema where the most of the Italo-Eritreans used to attend because it was cheaper from the other and because they don't feel stigmatized and racialized when they go there. At the same time, the mixed youth used to join party and to organize party within private house. And this is the case. This is important because some people here got married. So it was a way to create a kind of endogamic groups, although they were not similar, for example, in terms of status civitatis and so on and so forth. I mean, we also had some important and well-dressed parties. When we come to labor, here we have to make a distinction. People that have been legalized, recognized, and they can also have some, I don't want to say preferential, but trace path. Like, for example, Giorgio Pollera, who was the son of Alberto Pollera, an ethnographer, but also a civil servant in Eritrea and Ethiopia. And Giorgio was born in Eritrea, moved to Italy for their studies, went back to the Horn of Africa in Somalia as a volunteer, as an Italian volunteer soldier, and died there. Stefano Marazzani was one of the sons of a noble, and he inherited the plantation. So he was able, and this Fuga dall'Eritrea it was an article in I think it was the 1953. So when Italy understood that it was no more possible to return to their former colony, and all the Italians tried to move. And at the same time, in the years before this decision, the Italian government tried to push and to put under pressure the Italo-Eritreans and to say that they will provide them with the Italian citizenship if they support the cause of the Italian administration. And in this case, he remained there, he married there, and it is, say, the elite, the economic elite of the country. And this is Elvira Banotti, it was a feminist and a journalist, and it was quite interesting, his participation in this program, because she argued with Indro Montanelli, who was a journalist, but he was also in his 20s a soldier in Eritrea, and he was the leader of the colonial troops, of the African troops. And Montanelli used to say that he had this 12-year-old wife, and she argued because say, do you think it was a girl or a woman? Do you think you had the same attitude in Italy, and so on and so forth? But we are speaking of, in terms of status civitatis, Italians, so they were able to move from one place to another. It was different for the ones that grow up with their mother or grow up in missionary institutes that had some vocational training. One of the main vocational training was printing, and this printing background became a real opportunity because a lot of these Italo-Eritreans were skilled workers. And as skilled workers, they have been attracted in the 50s and 80s in Ethiopia. And some of them created the most important printing press, printing business in Ethiopia. And at the same time, women, among the, let's say, the first Ethiopian Airlines crew, there was Italo-Eritrean women. And when I try to ask why, in their opinion, they say we were not so controlled as our peers that maybe lived in a totally African environment, and we were able to get these job opportunities and travel the world. There again, to state that the idea of educating, of providing vocational training for Italo-Eritreans were there since the colonial time, but it continued also in the mid-50s and in the 60s. And here we have 4 institutes, all of them try to create specific expertise for people that is part of this group. Some of them, we can say, they start from a vulnerable position, and over time, they try to negotiate and manage better position. When we come to memories, it is another issue. It's true we can somehow try to collect, but we can't trace all this history. And we have seen that some people are writing their own history. The point is that it's not published by the mainstream publisher. So it's something that is usually self-financed and in few copies that they share with friends and relatives. But anyway, there is some, I just put some of them here. And also the debate concerning these children that are considered as something that is forgotten, abandoned, a past that Italy was not able to see, and that Africa, in the case of Eritrea, has already found a solution more inclusive compare that the European side. So there is there is a debate, and this debate is mainly promoted by the so-called second generation in Italy, because they experience the same problem. Until there is the jus sanguinis, they are not able to access the European Italian citizenship. That is what experienced the children of in this case of the Horn of Africa. And also there is another interesting phenomenon that is that are the shared memories, so from below, from these people, on the social media. And this creates another issues in terms of research, because how can we use, analyze, so it could be digital ethnographies, but also we are not able to understand exactly where and how these material has been produced. And in the last year, we also have some visual products. This is made in Italian and is the history of some families that are still and mainly based in Eritrea, or they moved to Italy in the 70s, like other Italians. And this is really interesting because she is Lina Fruzzetti. She's a visual anthropologist. She was born from an Italian father and an Eritrean mother in Asmara in 1945. Then they moved to Sudan, and then from Sudan to US, and she is teaching at the Brown University. So she reconstructs in this documentary how she discovered her Italian side, her Italian kinship side. And this is another project that collects memories of Italians of Ethiopia. But the really interesting thing is that the most of these Italians are Italians in terms of citizenship, and not all of them. But the memories are especially of that Italo-Eritreans that moved in the 50s and the 60s from Asmara, from Eritrea to Ethiopia. So the most of them are mixed ancestry Italians that decided to live their life in Ethiopia.
So can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
You're in my mother's house. Who's the author?
Lina Fruzzetti.
Lina.
Fruzzetti.
Thank you.
F-R.
I will try and
Z. Okay, and she has been issued in 2016. We screen it at the end of the month in Turin. But if you got the chance to go through it, because it's in 3 or 4 languages, but it is there is the title in English. And so, coming now to my conclusion, what I can say is that tracing and reconnecting the memories of Italo-Eritreans and more broadly of mixed ancestry people in the Red Sea requires a triangulation of source and the active participation of communities. These waves of memory emerging from archives, oral histories, memoir, and even social media challenge rigid categories and stereotypes and promote a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of the past. So in bringing these stories to light, they expose the danger of oversimplification and misrepresentation. And also, in a world striving, at least in theory, for inclusivity, tracing these lives not only exposes the persistence of racialized divisiveness, but also reinforces the urgency of dismantling biased narratives and to combat racism and colorblindness. So that's all. Thank you for your